We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Friday. Had kind of a big week. Lots of stuff to talk about, some interesting stuff, some stupid stuff. That's always seems to be the case. Give you a tip this weekend. We've got Ed coming up on Saturday, and I believe Maddie will be with us on Sunday. So you got that to look forward to. So I say a lot of stuff was going on, and we have a ton of emails. So we should probably get to the emails and not dick around like I normally do. So let's get right to it. First one says, "Hi, Mike. I listen to your podcast and TikToks daily. They're always thought provoking. So, yes, it's election season. The spam calls and texts remind us of that. As we're coming upon the 2024 presidential election and it continues to become a nastier and nastier race to the finish line, I can't help but wonder what is happening behind the scenes in Congress with those who played an active role in planning the orchestrating and implementing of the January 6th insurrection. That would be interesting to know. We don't hear whether charges will ever be brought onto those who help plan and aid the insurrection, who are still sitting in Congress, who make decisions which affect all of us. Criminals who aided in attempting to steal a presidential election are still sitting in Congress, making laws and passing laws, who continue to legislate. Why do we not hear more about that? What will come of those people? Josh Hawley, Jim Begg Jordan, Lauren Blobart, Marjorie Trader Green, etc., etc. Will they ever be held accountable for their role? Is that the end of the line? And it's whether or not their constituents vote them out of their seats when their terms come for reelection. Feels like the branches for checks and balances are not working properly, or the process just runs at a snail's pace. If that's the case, what is the statute of limitations? Has it surpassed? Well, I will tell you this. No, the statute of limitations has not passed. And I can assure you that Jack Smith won't allow it to pass before there's some kind of charges. And I'm convinced there will be charges against those sitting members of Congress. Yes, I'd like to see it right now, too. It seems like the only fair thing. But you have to understand what Jack Smith is doing. He's looking at Donald Trump as a time-sensitive case. So you have this insurrection, and you know many, many more people were involved with this, yet he is the only one that's been indicted, and that is by design. He is time-sensitive. They want to get this done with him before the election. So if they would have put a bunch of other defendants in there, it would have made it more convoluted and could have delayed the process. Having it just be Donald Trump makes it easier and quicker. And that seems to be the priority. And that makes some sense. To think that these other sitting members of Congress who were clearly involved in the insurrection won't get indicted, I wouldn't worry about that. I think they will get indicted. It's a question as to when. Will they wait to the start of the trial? Will they wait till the end of the trial? I don't know. But you got to kind of trust Jack Smith here. Yes, all of this runs at a snail's pace, but we've got to be patient about this stuff. I mean, back months and months and months ago, years ago, people would say, oh, he's never going to get indicted. Then he gets indicted. He's never going to lose that lawsuit. Then he loses that lawsuit. A lot of people come at this and say nothing's happened to Donald Trump. Well, a lot has happened to Donald Trump, and he's hanging by a thread. It's a very precarious situation for him. You're going to have to be patient, but these people sitting in Congress are not going to get away with it. I guarantee you that. They are going to get their indictments, and shit is going to get crazy for members of Congress. Thank you very much. Who was that? Do I even know? Lisa. Kind regards, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. Hopefully that answers your question. Don't worry about it. The sitting members of Congress will get theirs. And some of the non-sitting members of Congress, like the Roger Stones and the Ginny Thomases. All right, the next one says, hello, Boomer. It's early Wednesday morning, and I'm up early listening to your podcast. Thank you. In an earlier email to you, I suggested that the Republicans are sitting on a stunningly huge scandal. with these revelations on Smirnov and his ties to Comer and the evidence of the Russian interference in the elections, it is getting larger and more obvious that something is very wrong here. And it's beginning to look like the Republicans are very deeply compromised and in business with the Russians. With the huge changes in American society, I think they'd sell whatever soul they have to continue their ilk's self proclaimed superiority and ownership of this country. They are desperate at this point, and you and others have pointed out. There is a phraseology of projecting and confessions. If you've seen and heard DJT and his supporters, they actually telegraphed and hint at their guilt, a sure sign of extreme stress and fear. I think we're going to see this situation explode soon. I hope the Democrats use this as much as possible to get Biden and other Democrats over the top. The cult, of course, will ignore it, but I hope federal law enforcement exposes it, investigate it, and bring the participants to justice. I hope we can handle the situation. Again, think twice if you think it can happen here. Keep up the fact, Boomer. Thanks for letting me participate, Z-Man. I think you're right about that, Z-Man. Yeah, everybody's looking at whatever dirt is on Joe Biden or the fact that they were so stupid to use somebody who was ultimately convicted of lying on the stand. That seems ignorant and stupid by the Republicans, but it goes deeper than that. I've done some reading on it, and apparently the DOJ had told the Republicans before they even mentioned this witness that I wouldn't use this information. I wouldn't go public with it because it's not solid, it's not verified. But they still did. And you're absolutely right, Mike. They're desperate, so they'll use anything, even if they know it's wrong or a lie. But that offers a different situation in these circumstances. Over and above just being stupid, now it makes them complicit. They're going to Congress with a witness they know is compromised, they know is lying, and they're still pushing it out as if he's somebody with legitimacy. They even said as much. They said, this guy's a very good witness. But then we find out that he is getting a lot of his information from Russia, Russian intelligence. That's a problem even deeper, as you pointed out, Mike. Now is the Republican Party complicit with the Russian intelligence? Well, they've certainly infiltrated it, either by their ignorance and incompetence or by design, because they wanted it to happen. And if they wanted it to happen and they can prove that, there's going to be some indictments in and around that. There's another step to this that troubles me too, is that the FBI has had this man as an informant for 10 years. How is it that the FBI has been fooled by this guy for 10 years? Did they know? Did they know what they were dealing with, or were they just happy with any kind of dirt they could spill? This whole thing is a mess, and like Mike Z said, there's probably a bigger scandal here. You don't hear him talking about it much, but this is definitely something they need to look at because it could get real ugly. If the Russian intelligence has infiltrated our Congress, we're in a whole lot of trouble, and we need to clean house ASAP. And much like I said with regards to January 6th, there'll probably be some sitting members of Congress going to jail. James Comer and Jim Jordan should be thinking really hard right now. They're the leaders here, and they're the ones that brought this to the table. And if they knew ahead of time, they're in for some trouble. All right, the next email. Good day. I was listening to the podcast this morning, and you were talking about this Smirnov character being a Russian asset. Since it's been reported that he has contacts with several intel services, it indicates that he's more likely an intelligence broker. This is a person who basically a freelancer working in the intelligence sphere, buying and selling information to anyone interested. Intelligence services use such people to gather information in a way that no blowback falls on them. Also, such people are often used to pass information from one service to another, most often to let the receiver know, we know what you're up to, so don't do it, or to send the receiver's government on a wild goose chase, wasting millions of dollars in man hours trying to counter a red herring. The proof will be in the Russian snatch up of some Americans claiming they're American assets. Then Smirnov will definitely be a Russian asset. If Russia doesn't grab some Americans, then he'll be a broker. As for him being out on bail, giving some intel service an opportunity to assist him in getting him out of the country. This is highly unlikely. If he's a broker, he's been exposed. A broker's value is largely in their anonymity. What is more likely is that depending on what sensitive information he may have been privy to, he'll be targeted for elimination by one of several of those services. Stephanie. Interesting. You should point that out, Stephanie. And that's probably too. What would a Russian do if they knew somebody had a lot of information? Well, they'd fucking kill him. That's what they do. What's interesting was that they let him out on bail the first time around. But later yesterday, they rearrested him and put him back in jail. Now, I was listening to some legal people, and they said the only reason they could do that is if something new came to the forefront that gave them the option to pick him up and put him back in jail. And frankly, you might be right, Stephanie. Maybe there's some talk in the wind of doing away with this particular witness, and they're doing it for his protection as opposed to some other crime. Thank you, Stephanie. Next one, Rational Boomer. Earlier today, I went to get my taxes done, and during a conversation I had with the CPA, I learned that this person, who appeared to be well-educated, articulate, and reasonable, was actually a Trump supporter. I would have walked out of there right away. Don't trust a motherfucker like that. I just don't get it. Another example, an intelligent, kind, and honest friend of mine who I ran into recently posted a complaint on Facebook complaining that Trump hurt no one with his decades-old scams. The scams of increasing the values of his properties by 20 or 30 times their value as long as he paid off the loans. I just don't get it at all. I guess I'm just complaining. What do you think? I also want to respond to some of the comments that you made after reading my email and a few of the other listeners' emails who believe that it would be a good idea to talk about some of the topics that some think Trump that make Trump look strong and not beaten. I remember an email about a couple of billionaires or maybe multimillionaires who donated money to Trump's legal funds. Another wrote about several very large groups, such as the Heritage Society or Foundation, or some such groups sponsoring Project 2025. In any case, I was a bit put off because you misrepresented what I was saying. How could I misrepresent what you say? I read your fucking email. And what I thought they were saying. I don't think that it was purposeful on your part, but you said that I or we wanted to talk about it because I or we want to look at the negative side of things. You said that I or we don't see that Trump is already beaten, and all I or we want to do is be fearful, curl up in a fetal position and sulk or something like that. Well, please know that you couldn't be further from the truth when it comes to how I feel. Then why don't you say what you mean? I agree with you when it comes to Trump. I think that he is done, though he doesn't know when to call it quits. He never will. What I was trying to do was to start a conversation to help educate people what the far right is trying to do and what they have successfully done for the past 50 or 60 years. They have changed the conversation and the beliefs of the average citizens of this country. The far right, ultra rich conservatives start with Powell memo, elected Reagan, got people to believe that Republicans were good for Reagan or were good for the economy, starting with Reagan, who tripled the national debt. And every Republican president ever since hurt our economy, cut taxes for the rich, which also hurt our economy. Eliminated regulations on corporations, sent our jobs overseas to get cheap labor, which also hurt our economy, also killed labor unions, took human rights from its citizens, and on and on. Our country looks nothing like it did once they organized and declared war on all American citizens, except for the very rich conservatives. In the early 70s, the rich conservatives, and I agree with that, the 70s, I do not, nor do I ever want to curl up in a fetal position and give up. I would hope not. I was hoping the rational boomer community could just start a rational conversation on what has happened, and maybe that will get others to have conversations with others, as I've heard you say. That's exactly what I'm doing here. I agree that we need to kill the Republican Party. However, we must do so much more. I understand that this is your show and I don't want to dominate it. I can't. I'm not rational in my approach. I like your approach. I like Ed's approach because he's calm and rational. I have heard him mention some of what I described on previous podcasts. I like Old Soul's approach because she's kind, caring, and human in her approach. I ask that you consider what I've said and use your methods to help educate many more listeners. Thank you for listening to me, Boris. I think educating people is kind of what I do. It's what I've been doing all along. And, be honest with you, I really didn't want to go over this again. I'll tell you what bothers me, Boris. I'll tell you what bothers me. Every time we hear something in the ether, in the news, it always feels like it's Republican narrative that's been thrown out there, bounced around, and people grab it and they believe it. The situation with Donald Trump is done. I don't care what anybody says. If you're not looking at all the crimes and all the money being taken away from him, consider this. In last month's fundraising, Joe Biden was number one, Nikki Haley was number two, Donald Trump was third. He's not getting the money that he was once getting. And in fact, he's struggling. He's struggling a lot. The Republicans are struggling. You want to educate people about something that never happened and may never happen. I'm saying there's enough stuff going on right now that we need to educate people about and make sure they understand without going into something that is a maybe. Donald Trump did steal classified documents. Donald Trump did try to overthrow the government. Donald Trump did rape a woman. Donald Trump and the Republican Party just tried to feed our Congress with a witness who was prepped by Russian intelligence. If you're saying I'm not willing to fight because I won't talk about those topics, I'll talk about those topics if I felt they were important. You got to understand, we're at a 5-alarm fire right now. We can't worry about smoke alarms anymore. We got to worry about the fire that's fucking going on. We got to put this fire out before we can worry about prevention or anything like that. We've got a mess right now. And what I see my job is doing is explaining what's going on, because there's more than enough going on to sink Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And you know what? It's fucking working. I'm not saying it's because of me, but because of a lot of people and because of Donald Trump's incompetence. He has brought all this criminality and all this corruption to the surface like a fever blister. And now we all know. We can talk about a lot of stuff. What happens if we become a fascist state? I don't even want to think about that because it's not going to happen. Just not going to happen. And you can disagree with me if you want, but it's not going to happen. And if you really feel confident that it's a distinct possibility, I'd be happy to wager with you. What do you want? $500, $1,000? I'll bet it with you. See, the thing is, everybody wants their own point of view in this. All I'm doing on this show is giving my point of view. You can take it for what it's worth or not take it for what it's worth. When people offer information, I'm happy to give it. But I've gotten 3 letters about this Project 2025. And that's something in the offing. Now, if we get down to October and it looks like Donald Trump's going to win, maybe then we talk about it because we need more ammunition. But I think we have enough ammunition. There's nothing that suggests Donald Trump or even the Republicans are going to win. Everything they do is hurt them since 2020. Everything they've done has hurt them. And 2022 is a perfect illustration of that. We need to make sure that people understand and know all of that's what's going on now, the fire that's burning now. And then Once we get that fire out, I can worry about possibilities. But if we get this fire out and it goes the way I say it does, then that project 2025 is not even going to be an issue. I don't know if you get that. You got to think ahead a little bit instead of worrying all the time. I'm going to tell you this. People who worry all the time about the worst possible thing end up getting that. You got to go into everything confident. You got to expect you're going to win. You may not always win, but you'll win more often than not. I know you really want me to start a commentary and a conversation about Project 2025. And you know what? Just because you wrote that email, I'm definitely not doing it because that's the kind of prick I am. I'll talk about Project 2025 when it appears to be imminent and it can do some good as far um, as this upcoming election. But the fact that Republicans have overturned Roe v. Wade, that alone is enough to end this for the Republican Party in 2024. Let's focus on the issues we've got now. You've heard Old Soul on this show. And yes, she's a very soft talking, compassionate soul. But as I said to her on the air like yesterday, I said, "Old Soul, I'm getting to know you a little bit. And you're compassionate and easy talking. But I guarantee you, if you pissed her off, she would be a force to be reckoned with. I guarantee you, because she's smart, she's got a sharp tongue. And if you raise her to that level, and it would take a lot, she would do some serious damage to just about anybody, including me." Just stop, Boris. Stop trying to tell me what you really mean each and every time you send this. I appreciate you listening. I don't appreciate you trying to program my show. I'm not going to do it. I do what I think is best at the moment I'm doing it. I'm doing what I think is most important when I'm doing it. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, up until now, it seems to have worked fine. If you can give me information that I need about things that are going on now, the fire that's burning now, cool. But don't tell me what if, maybe it could be, what if this happened. I don't care about that. I care about the fire now. I care about putting it out now, and then we'll worry about what we have to worry about when we get there. That's the problem with most people. They worry about everything, and then it becomes insurmountable, overwhelming, and nothing gets fixed. You got to take it a step at a time. You got to deal with the immediate problem, and that's what I do. You can either like it or not like it, but that's the way it is. And I read your email just as you wrote it, so don't tell me I'm misrepresenting you. You said what you said. You're maybe saying you didn't understand what you said. Well, then you have to be clearer. All right. Hello, Mike Irwin again from Belgium. Belgium, not Belgium, Ohio. Belgium, the country. I hope I'm not the only European following you on YouTube or whatever platform you use to broadcast. You are not. I get people from Ireland, from Canada, from all over the world, and I appreciate them immensely. I have two questions. I heard you say you worked within radio. What did you actually do? I did a lot of shit. I started working in radio when I was about 15 years old and finally retired from radio when I was 57. Um, I've been a disc jockey. I've done play-by-play of sports. Um, I've done traffic reporting in a Department of Transportation building where they had 500 cameras, and I basically did play-by-play of traffic. I did. I was a production director. I created and produced and distributed syndicated shows that went all over the country. I've done pretty much everything you can do in radio. Even did some sales, which is the worst job in the world. But I couldn't be happier to be outside of radio now. That is a dying business. All right. Second, I switch off whenever I see or hear a MAGA dork, beginning with the Orange Fuhrer himself. I watch the Midas Touch Network, but lately a lot of their videos begin with a segment of Diaper Donny or oratoring to his base, presumably for clickbait. I skip those videos. I just can't stand them or any post or comment of any Trumplafuck. But on the other hand, I know I should always keep an open mind and see what the other side has to say. I just can't bring myself to it. Any advice? Do what you're doing, man. I got to be perfectly honest with you. I can't flip on Fox News and watch it for any length of time. I can't sit and watch Donald Trump unless he made an incredible mistake and I need to know about it for whatever TikTok or podcast I might be doing. I can't listen to it. It's so foul and so deceitful. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So all I can tell you, Erwin, is just just ignore the shit. Ignore it. You don't want to give them any more power with more ratings by giving them your attention. He finishes up by saying again, thanks for your great podcast, Erwin67, also a boomer, Belgium. Got to get to Belgium sometime. Never been into Europe as yet, but my wife and I are talking about it. Linda says, I never miss your programs. They're very enlightening and entertaining, but based in reality. Keep the truth flowing. I plan to have a serious discussion with you in regards to Donald, just not now. I'm hoping you'll be able to answer some questions, for I believe you to be not very knowledgeable. I'll write soon, Linda R. Anytime you like, Linda. We're always welcoming of emails, and I'm always anxious to hear from you. Next one comes from Gussie. Hey, Boomer, I agree with you. I believe that there are a whole lot of people who don't realize what life is really about. It never dawns on them when you are a real winner in life. Money is the cheapest part of it, Gussie. Absolutely. I've said that before. When you're on your deathbed, and I've been with some relatives who are on their deathbed, you could have all the money in the world, the nice houses, the toys, and all that stuff. But when you're laying there in your final moments, all you have is your memories and whatever legacy you leave to your family. And if your memories are bad and your legacy is bad, you've lived a wasted life without regard to how much money you made. Next one says, hey, Mike, I must say I always liked John Fetterman, but that has increased with him calling out chicken little Democrats freaking out about Biden and his age. He pretty much told them to shut the fuck up and put on your MAGA hat. 100% agree. You're not helping and just buying into the Republican lie. Another reason I think he's right now, we got Nikki Haley saying Biden is more dangerous than Trump. What the actual fuck? This shows she's not only desperate for something to stick, but is no better than Trump. Yeah, I've been saying that all along. She's desperate and is looking out for her own ass and not America's best interest. If she was, she wouldn't say such BS. Yeah, she'd have some courage and fucking speak out against Donald Trump. Even she should know that. What else do you expect from someone who says, yeah, Trump is guilty, but I'd pardon him? Keep digging your hole and backtracking from your statements, just like Trump. Biden is clearly the right choice. Later on, Jace from Texas. Thank you, Jace, and I couldn't agree more. Next one says, hi, Mike. I missed the story the other day, so maybe others have too. Most of this is taken from an article posted by The Hill. The Supreme Court let stand the sanctions on several pro-Trump 2020 campaign lawyers regarding Michigan's presidential elections. Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, and 5 others brought the lawsuit against Michigan state officials and Detroit in November 2020, one of the dozens of lawsuits filed in an attempt to prove election results were illegitimate in states where Trump lost. Originally, U.S. District Judge Linda Parker of the Eastern District of Michigan dismissed the case and ordered sanctions for the Trump lawyers, describing the lawsuit as a historic and profound abuse of judicial process and simply baseless. Parker also referred her decision to disciplinary authorities, where each attorney is admitted for investigation and possible suspension or disbarment. Now, the Trump lawyers were ordered to pay back attorney's fees accumulated by Michigan state officials in Detroit in seeking the sanctions and to take legal education classes. That bunch of mofos deserves this and a whole lot more. Thanks and take care, Peggy H.M. Yeah, Peggy, these people just keep losing. The Sidney Powells and some of these other fucks, they're going to fade away into obscurity and be broke or jailed or both. Next one comes from our friend Old Soul. I transcribed an interview Tommy Tuberville had with two reporters. Looks like Republicans caught another car and now they don't know what to do. Reporter one, do you have a reaction to the Alabama Supreme Court ruling that the fact that embryos are children? Tuberville, yep, I was all for it. We need to have more kids. We need to have an opportunity to do that. And then, yep, I thought this was the right thing to do. Reporter one, but IVF is used to have more children, and right now IVF services are paused at some of the clinics. Aren't you concerned this could impact people who are trying to have kids? Tuberville, well, that's for another conversation. Of course it is. People need to have that. We need more kids. We need the people to have an opportunity to have more kids. Reporter two, Senator, what do you say to the women right now in Alabama who no longer have access to IVF and will not get pregnant as a result of this ruling? What do you say to them? Tuberville. Well, that's a hard one. It really is. It's really hard because again, you want people to have the opportunity, and that's what I was telling her. We need more kids, but that's exactly the opposite of what you fucking said. So Republicans want to ban contraception, birth control, abortions, and now IVF. Remember, a few weeks ago on the podcast, I was talking about Republicans wanting to make adoption the only option outside of natural pregnancies to balance this forced birth nonsense. Well, looks like many of us were right and saw this coming. What's puzzling me is why didn't they wait until after the election to do this? I honestly thought they didn't want to fan the fire they started when they overturned Roe. Clearly, I was wrong. They not only fanned the fire, these fools threw gasoline onto it. I'm truly stunned they pulled this crap the year of an election when they are already struggling. Any thoughts on what made them do this during the election year when women are already pissed at them? I hope you're feeling better today. Thanks for what you do, Old Soul. Yeah, I was feeling poorly yesterday. I was getting better by the time I did the show, but uh, my wife and I both had this nauseous feeling, and it just wasn't good. Still had a little bit today, but I'm getting better, so that's good news. Why are they doing that? The only explanation, Old Soul, is that they're stupid motherfuckers. I mean, why did they overturn Roe v. Wade prior to the midterms? That was absolutely ignorant. Why are they doing this now? I think they have a hard time admitting that they're wrong. So they just do what they always do. They double and triple down, they embrace it, and they act as if it's good. It's kind of like Jim Jordan and James Comer. Oh, yeah, that guy was a Russian asset who was our witness, but that's no big deal. That doesn't change anything. No, motherfucker, it changes everything. That's the only thing I can imagine, Old Souls, that they're dumb as fuck, and they show us that every goddamn day. Here's another email from Peg. When you and Old Soul were talking about Fonnie Willis being on the stand, it reminded me of something attorney Barb McQuaid said. The woman who was grilling Fonnie is married to another attorney, and they're on the same team that's working that Trump case. Talk about a double standard. Yeah, I'd heard about that. I heard about that, and that's kind of hypocritical, isn't it? All right. Hi, Mike. What the fuck? I'm sick of these far right religious Republican fucks forcing us all to believe like them. The Alabama ruling was ridiculous. While I agree that the couple deserves to be compensated, calling an unborn frozen embryo a child is idiotic. The one Alabama Supreme Court justice cited that the Bible, in his opinion, I thought we had both the freedom of religion as well as the freedom from religion. We're not a theocracy. I read that a Florida anti abortion group is already trying to cite this case as precedent to completely ban abortion. They think they are the silent majority, but they are really a very vocal minority. I wish they'd go back to being silent. Well, they will after the 2024 election when they get their ass kicked. Once again, the media is trying to play up Trump as some powerful figure rather than the broke joke he is. I read an article today talking about Trump's GoFundMe. It kept saying he passed a major fundraising hurdle. They kept making it sound like Trump was close to raising the money. And then, about halfway through the article, they got to the point and actually told the truth that he'd just gotten over the $1 million mark. That's not even 1% of what he owes in the fraud case. They grifted $1 million in 6 days. He's never going to be able to grift his supporters enough to pay that. Yeah, and there's another thing to consider of that $1 million. He's not getting $1 million because there's interest accruing on that amount of $87,000 a day, $87,500 a day. So if you take $87,000 times 6, we're looking at almost a half a million. So if he got $1 million, he'll be lucky if he gets $500,000 of it. Trump lost again today and possibly will again here in a few days. Judge Engoron told Donny to basically fuck off after Donny tried to get another delay from paying the 355 plus million. Why would a supposed billionaire who keeps saying he should be on the Forbes top 400 list need time to pay such a minor amount? From what I've seen, he basically claimed poverty in the court. The other thing he's trying to do is move all his businesses to Florida. Letitia James is trying to stop it. And how did Donny think it would work with him having a receiver? He's circling the drain. Yeah, he can't exactly do much because he doesn't get to make the decision. The receiver has to make that decision. It's like you say, let Donny talk and he'll fuck himself every time. He really can't help himself. In the last week or so, Donny came alarmingly close and possibly did defame E. Jean Carroll again. He once again said, "Who is this woman? I don't know her." Apparently, her lawyers are considering suing him for a third time, and why not? If they did, I'd almost expect another jury to give several hundred million, if not $1 billion this time. The other thing he said was on Fox. Apparently, he again basically admitted to taking documents and claimed it was his right to do it. The reason his lawyers have to try such ridiculous defenses like saying the documents are old and outdated is because Donny keeps talking and ruining anything they might consider trying. As much as listening to him makes my head hurt, let him talk his way into a prison cell. Thanks, Eric. Eric is from Iowa. He's on the show frequently. Well, thank you, Eric, and thanks to all the people who sent in emails. I hope you'll continue. Just send it to rationalboomer at gmail.com. Even you, Boris, I'm happy to hear your emails, but let it go. Let it go. Participate in the conversation and don't keep trying to explain yourself why I should believe the way you do. I don't, and I'm not going to, and I don't have to. And if it makes you mad, I'm sorry, but I'm not doing this to make everybody happy. There may be people that don't like the things I say, and that's fine. That's fine. You can listen, you can hate listen to me or like listen to me, but I'm going to do what I do. My mom knew that. My bosses knew that. My wife knows that. I'm just going to do what I do because I feel confident about it and I have reasoning for doing it. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, we're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. We've got some interesting stories to talk about. Donald Trump is literally flailing. I've heard tell that he's trying to change the addresses on some of his businesses to Florida address to pull a fast one on Judge Engoron. Fortunately, Judge Engoron is not an imbecile, and they caught that right away. That's going to cause Donald Trump some problems. And now that it's becoming more imminent that Donald Trump's going to have to come up with some cash in the $355 million decision, he's getting a little nervous. He went to Judge Engoron and says, could we put a pause on this for like 30 days? It'll help me get this money together. Well, first of all, no, it won't. He just wants to delay the inevitable like he always does. But he's obviously freaking out now. He went to the judge and said, I need a little extra time. Well, Judge Arthur Engeron has refused to pause the deadline for Trump Donald Trump to pay damages in his New York fraud case. In a ruling on Thursday, Engeron rejected Trump's motion for a 30-day delay before he would begin paying the $355 million judgment against him. It means that the more Trump waits to pay, the more interest piles up. Just Securities' Adam Classfield revealed that online. Now, on Monday, Trump's lawyers asked Engeron to pause their fine, but Attorney General Letitia James responded that the judge ruling on Friday made it clear that there isn't any basis for the stay. In an email to Trump attorney Cliff Robert, Engeron was short. He says, You have failed to explain, much less justify, any basis for a stay. That's what happens when you piss off the judge for 6 months leading up to this point. Now you want a favor? Wow, Donnie, that's dumb as fuck. Now, the decision comes after an ABC interview in which James said the state would move to seize Trump's assets if the fine isn't paid. If he does not have the funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets, James said. We're prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers, and yes, I look at 40 Wall Street, Lower Manhattan Trump property each and every day. I tell you what, Letitia James knows how to get in Donald Trump's head. She knows how to fuck with him. And that's what's making him nervous. It's finally becoming a realization to him that his cherished properties may get snapped up by the courts and sold off in a fire sale, with him not having any control over the process because the receivership will end up doing the sale. It's now becoming real to him. I'm convinced that Donald Trump will look at things like criminal cases, and as long as they're off in the distance to a certain extent, uh, he will somehow convince himself that they'll never happen. But this is imminent. This money thing is imminent. He has 30 days to pay it off or post a bond. Now, apparently, he's been out knocking on doors trying to get a bond. And guess what? Ain't nobody interested. Nobody's interested in giving Donald Trump $500 million. If none of this stuff was going on, nobody would give him $500 million because they know he doesn't pay back. The bottom line is the state of New York and the people of New York have to be protected. So he's got to put the money up. If he doesn't put the money up, then they are going to start liquidating his shit. And as I say with Donald Trump, this is looking imminent now. So now he's freaking out. All right, we talked about this in the emails. Alexander Smirnov, he's the former FBI informant indicted for lying about President Joe Biden's family and their alleged dealings in Ukraine. He was arrested and then he was released on bail, which nobody could understand why that happened. Clearly, he's a flight risk, Jeff. They put a GPS monitor on him and they took his passports. But, if he's got this connection with the Russians, trust me, he would figure a way out, or these other folks would figure a way out to get him the hell out of the country. Well, he was rearrested yesterday, thank God, and he's in custody. Though prosecutors fought to keep him behind bars, Smirnov was released by Magistrate Judge Daniel Albrechts in Nevada on Tuesday with several conditions, including GPS monitoring and the surrender of his 2 passports. That magistrate needs to be looked at because you don't have to be a magistrate or a judge to see that was a bad choice. And it's been overturned now, so fuck him. Prosecutors say the Nevada judge to delay his release, but the judge declined and Smirnov was allowed to walk out. Now Smirnov's defense lawyers say the client was rearrested Thursday on a new warrant for the exact same charges, this time signed by federal district judge Otis Wright, who will oversee the criminal case out of California. Now, despite Judge Albrecht's prior ruling, denial of the stay request, and Mr. Smirnoff's prior release from custody on the morning of February 22nd, Mr. Smirnoff was arrested for a second time on the same charges and based on the same indictment set forth while at the undersigned counsel's law office for meetings with counsel, his lawyers wrote in a court filing. Why would you release this motherfucker anyway? He's lying to Congress and he's getting his information from Russian intelligence. For all intents and purposes, he's a disinformation fuck or he's a spy. That fucker should not be out of jail. Now, the unusual move means that Smirnoff will need to argue for his release once again. Prosecutors had already moved for a rehearing on the matter in front of the judge in California, reasserting their concerns about Smirnoff's connections to foreign intelligence officials and his access to significant amounts of cash. He said he had $15,000. Turned out it was more like $6 million. Yeah, that might be a red flag. A spokesperson for special counsel David Weiss, who was prosecuting the case, confirmed Smirnoff's second arrest. Now, prosecutors allege that Smirnoff repeatedly lied to his FBI handler, whom he worked with for more than a decade, and should not be trusted. He also has extensive contacts in Russia and elsewhere, prosecutors said, and lied to authorities about his access to over $6 million in liquid funds, more than enough money for him to live comfortably overseas for the rest of his life. Now, Smirnoff has yet to enter a plea. Prosecutors also filed several sealed documents on the court docket in California on Thursday. The content of those documents not yet known. Now, Smirnoff's lawyers have denied in court any assertion that their client would flee the country or otherwise try to escape prosecution. Well, of course they did. Tell you what, you defense attorneys, would you put up your homes to bet against it? They said in their filing Thursday that Smirnoff has remained fully compliant with his conditions of release since his court-ordered release and slammed prosecutors for requesting a rehearing in California with no mention of any second, then unserved arrest warrant for Mr. Smirnoff based on the same charges. He's asking for an emergency hearing. He'll get it, but I don't think they're going to let this dumb motherfucker out of jail. It's crazy to even think they would. I mean, this is all pretty egregious. Lying to Congress, cavorting with Russian intelligence. Again, I'll say this too, over and above Congress allowing themselves to be infiltrated by Russian intelligence disinformation, you got to wonder about the FBI too. This guy's been an informant for 10 years for the FBI. They kind of vouched for him somewhat. But then when Congress decided to take this witness up, they said, yeah, you probably don't want to use him for a witness or promote this publicly. Well, of course, Congress, the Republicans did, and that in my estimation makes them culpable for whatever crimes have been committed here. But why is it that the FBI has been hanging out with this guy when he's been so tight with Russian intelligence? Is he a double spy? I don't know. But the fact of the matter is the FBI and Congress put this country in danger by passing along Russian disinformation and allowing Russians to infiltrate our Congress. I don't know what more you have to do to stay in jail, but that motherfucker needs to stay in jail. All right. Now, some conservatives with money in their pockets will be walking away from the Conservative Political Action Conference this week with merchandise you have to see to believe. You remember CPAC when they had the golden statue of Donald Trump? I guess the crazy shit is still coming. CPAC used to be a legitimate event, and now it's nothing more than a fucking joke, a MAGA joke. Images from attendees of CPAC, where Donald Trump, a host of Republican politicians, right-wing media celebrities, and foreign leaders and conspiracy theorists are set to appear, hit social media with a bang this week. Earlier, CPAC announced propagandist news outlets such as MSNBC would not be credentialed to report on the conference and would therefore be forced to purchase tickets. Ross Story is in attendance there. CPAC used to have overflow rooms, noted one such reporter, with a video of rows and rows of empty seats. Anyway, guess this is why they decided to yank my media badge and demand money from me. Perhaps the crowd had hit the shops. If so, here's what they found. Now, this is kind of important for context. There's more than 1,265 people who have been charged with criminal offenses after angry rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. The losses suffered because of the siege are estimated at about 2.9 million. Among those facing charges, of course, is the former president, who says he's a victim of a political witch hunt. Now, there was a uh, Twitter comment, "Do your job, Trump," at "Do your job, Trump." So what you do is you baselessly accuse it of stealing your quarters, smash it, and then cry that you're being persecuted when you're hauled out of the arena. Don't even know what that fucking means. The bottom line is CPAC is a joke. It's an absolute joke. It was legitimate at one time, but it is no longer. And it's just a freak show, really, of MAGA fucks doing crazy, stupid shit. I mean, you could probably talk to 10 people and combine their IQ and still not break 100. Speaking of stupid, let's talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene. She had another mistake, a miscue, if you will. Kind of funny, actually. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene called for Judge Arthur Engoron to be disrobed after ruling against former President Donald Trump in his $354 million fraud case. She wants Arthur Engoron disrobed. I will tell you this, Marjorie, that's not a thing. He could be impeached. Um, he could be charged by the DOJ, but disrobed, that's not a thing. Well, maybe it's a thing if Lauren Boebert were involved, but that's a whole different story. Last week, Engoron ordered him to pay the $354 million. Now, Greene is a big supporter of Trump, as you know. She took to social media to demand Engoron to be thrown out and apparently his judge's garment be removed because he found that Trump overvalued his properties. Judge Engoron, this is what she said, Judge Engoron should be disrobed and thrown out. He's a disgrace. Mar-a-Lago in 1981 was only a home. Today, it's one of the most exclusive social clubs in the world, Greene wrote. Well, see, now she said the quiet part out loud. When it was a private home, it was worth more than now that it's a club. And Donald Trump made that distinction so that he would pay less taxes. So to suggest it's worth more goes against what Donald Trump did because he made it a club as opposed to a home. Donald Trump is the reason why the value of Mar-a-Lago is less than he thinks it should be. He wants both benefits. He wants cheap taxes and he wants it to be the most valuable home in the country. Sorry, Donnie, that's not the way it works. And Margie, I never would have expected you to know anything about that shit. And she went on to say that Mar-a-Lago is worth more than that ridiculous judgment he ruled against President Trump. See, that's the thing is they're picking little bits and pieces out of there that they say are wrong, which are not wrong. But even if they were wrong, it wouldn't really have any bearing on the ultimate point of the lawsuit. What I just told you is that he went from taking it as a home to a club because if it's a club, it's worth less and he pays less taxes. But now he wants the value to be the same as if it is a private home, but it's not because of his own doing. That in itself is a crime. That's what we're talking about. Underinflating, overinflating properties to benefit you. That's what Donald Trump has done. And that's what he continues to do. He lost the lawsuit. He's been fined $354 million and then some, and he's fucking stuck. He can try to appeal this, like I've said, but he's got to put up the money in order to do that. And so he's fucked either way he goes. And the clock is ticking, and he doesn't have the money. So just wait. There's going to be some liquidation sales. So if you want a good deal on Trump Tower, it'll probably be available. All right, Donald Trump and his senior staff are pointing fingers. They're mad at a leak from his camp that wound up on the front of the New York Times. Isn't this always the way? You know, whenever some shitty or scandalous news comes out, it gets leaked out. The first thing Republicans want to do is crucify the leaker and disregard whatever the scandal or the crime is. Now, this newspaper revealed that Trump had privately told allies he supports a 16-week national abortion plan with some exceptions. The former president's campaign reportedly greeted the story with anger, frustration, and paranoia that's left them scrambling to clean up the political fallout. Probably asking, what is the political fallout? Well, you see what Donald Trump's doing. He's trying to take credit for overturning Roe v. Wade. Apparently, he just figured out that's not a good thing. That's not going to help me. Too late. You'd already admitted to it. So he thought he'd kind of try to temper this, and he was spitballing the idea, well, how about if I just do 16-week national abortion? That would make me more a centrist. But the problem lies here. His fan base, evangelicals, they ain't going to like that 16-week national abortion plan. So as much as he's pissed off 70% of the country that support Roe v. Wade, now he's in the process of pissing off his base, the ones that he's counting on in 2024. Now, the Trump campaign initially said the report was fake news, but did not deny or dispute the reporting. But a campaign spokesman said Wednesday the story was fake and untrue. That's what Donald Trump always says when he gets caught up in some embarrassing situation. But a source with direct knowledge of the situation confirmed to Rolling Stone that the former president had privately expressed enthusiasm for the 16-week prohibition, saying that it was the position shared by most Americans. Again, he wants it both ways. He wants to be the hero for overturning Roe v. Wade, but now he wants to temper it. And the evangelicals ain't going to like it. So Trump has been privately endorsing this 16-week ban in conversations with allies and confidants that a leak was inevitable. The former president described himself as the most pro-life president ever and certainly needs anti-abortion conservatives to turn out for him in November. But sources said Trump is terrified that his positions on abortion rights would alienate independents and suburban women voters. Absolutely. You're pissing off both sides right now. You're pissing off both sides, and this is what Donald Trump does. He opens his mouth, he fucks himself over more and more. Every time. It's not like it's occasional. It's every time he fucks himself over. It's ridiculous. Now, Donald Trump is trying to cobble together enough funds to square away the nearly $454 million that Trump owes. Among his options are he can either pay it, find a benefactor, or he may possibly be forced to declare bankruptcy. But whatever he does, he can't dodge it. It could also prompt him to file for personal bankruptcy because, again, in this order, Donald Trump and his business entities that were found liable are jointly and severely liable. Lisa Rubin, while being interviewed on MSNBC's Alex Wagner tonight, that means that any one of them can be liable for the whole of the judgment attributed to them. And that also means that Donald Trump can escape this by just plunging those business entities themselves into bankruptcy, because it would leave him individually on the hook for the totality of it. He's fucked if he does, he's fucked if he doesn't. The only way to escape it altogether would be to file for personal bankruptcy, which would place an automatic stay on further litigation, including judgment execution. The stunning sum handed down by Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron on February 16th mandates the former President Donald Trump pay damages after losing his fight in a sprawling civil fraud case. Engoron determined that Trump inflated his assets to secure sweetheart deals and loans as he expanded his real estate portfolio. Um, Trump has continued to portray himself as being persecuted and vowed to appeal. Meanwhile, the New York Attorney General Letitia James, who brought the civil case against Trump, explained that she would seek to seize some of the former president's assets if he's unable to foot the bill. Notably, Trump is forbidden from securing any monies from financial institutions that are registered or chartered in New York. But Rubin said that still left lots of financial institutions that probably fall outside of that. She noted that includes wealthy individuals like Elon Musk or somebody, and even foreign countries who could be inclined to supply Trump with a bailout. It also may be hard to know if anybody steps in with a bag. And that's the point. All that shit could happen, but anybody who would give him money would have to expect something out of it. Something. And what would that be? Do you think you're going to get paid back? No. Well, yeah, but you'll get all kinds of preferential treatment when he becomes president. Anybody, anybody with an intelligent mind sees that Donald Trump cannot win the election. So what happens when you give him $500 million, he doesn't win the election? Do you think uh, that you're going to give him the money when there's no chance of you getting your money back? Yeah, I find that hard to believe. $500 million is a lot of money. And I can't imagine anybody's going to be a white knight and help him out in this situation. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I suppose it could. Maybe Elon Musk hasn't lost enough money yet. He paid $44 billion um, for Twitter, and then promptly lost about half of it, 20 billion. Maybe half a billion isn't a big deal for him. We'll see. Now, Donald Trump's still fucking around with this case down in Florida with Judge Aileen Cannon. Donald Trump on Thursday asked Judge Cannon to toss several classified document counts on presidential immunity grounds. Now we're waiting to hear whether or not the Supreme Court gives him immunity, and that's not going to happen. Arguing that the former president was cleared by the Presidential Records Act to keep the records. Yeah, we've heard that story long ago. That's not going to work. Special counsel Jack Smith indicted Donald Trump, as well as some of his own employees, for unlawfully keeping certain classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Now, the suit is rife with allegations of judicial bias. Trump has now moved to dismiss the entire case. He's done that with all the cases, and not even Aileen Cannon is dumb enough to do that. CNN's Caitlin Collins reported Trump's team has just filed a motion, actually several motions, to dismiss classified documents case in Florida, citing in part presidential immunity. Well, what happens if you set it aside and then the Supreme Court comes out and says you don't have immunity? Aileen Cannon can't even be that stupid. She won't do it. And if she does, it's off to the 11th Circuit they go, and she'll be out on her ass. In addition to President Trump's constitutional authority and the DOJ's established practice prior to this case, presidential discretion to designate records as personal under PRA adds additional ambiguity for reasons set forth in President Trump's motion. They're trying everything they can. They're trying to get this thing dismissed and go with the immunity sometime before the Supreme Court comes to the table and tells him that he doesn't have immunity. So, nice try, Don. It's not going to work. nothing you're doing now works at all. And it's almost laughable when you see this. It truly is. Now, I wanted to talk about this a little off what I'm talking. We talked about the embryo case and how they want to call them children. Um, it's kind of interesting because it turns out Alabama Chief Justice Tom Parker, who wrote the concurring opinion in last week's explosive Alabama Supreme Court case regarding the frozen embryos, have the same rights that they have the same rights as living children, recently appeared on a show by self-anointed prophet and QAnon conspiracy theorist. Oh, that gives you credibility, Chief Justice. Parker was a featured guest on Someone You Should Know, hosted by John NO, a Christian nationalist and influencer and devoted supporter of former President Donald Trump. Over the course of 11-minute interview, Parker articulated a theocratic worldview at odds with functioning in a pluralistic society. He told NO, God created government, and it's heartbreaking that we have let it get into the possession of others. Media Matters, the liberal media watchdog group, was the first to report on Parker's appearance. The state's chief Supreme Court justice would associate him with NO as a cause for alarm. NO is a prolific conspiracy theorist, often weaving QAnon information with prophecies he claimed to receive directly from God. Oh, yeah, this guy's a doozy. Now, as reported by Right Wing Watch, NO has claimed that Trump is on assignment from God to work with angels Michael and Gabriel to take down George Soros and Bill Gates, among others. He has claimed that Russian President Vladimir Putin is fighting Luciferian pedophiles in Ukraine in a battle to stop them from deploying vaccines and 5G that would turn people transhumanist semi-robots. He has claimed that the majority of other world leaders are satanic pedophiles who steal blood and do sacrifices. And the Supreme Court Chief Justice goes on that show. What's happened to the separation of church and state? Apparently, this Supreme Court Justice doesn't believe in it. Apparently, he doesn't believe in the Constitution. These are the fucks that are making decisions about the health of our women in this country. Now, with this embryo thing, I've said this before. If you treat them like children, that means if something happens to the embryos, then somebody could be prosecuted for murder, theoretically. But it also should mean that if they are considered children, that if you have some embryos set aside for future use, that you should be able to write them off on taxes. I mean, if the definition is they are real children, then they should be a write-off for anybody that has them. Of course, they'll find a way around that and say, oh, well, that's not what we meant. No, it's exactly what you meant, you dumb fucks. That whole case in Alabama is an embarrassment, and it will ultimately be turned around. It may not happen until well after the 2024 election, but it will be turned around. It's so ridiculous. It's not even believable. It's so ridiculous. So we'll see what happens with that, but it's a fucking mess. All right, I'm hoping it's Friday today. Maybe this will be the day that the Supreme Court says whether or not they're going to stay Donald Trump's immunity claims. If they say they're not going to stay it, that puts Donald Trump in even further trouble. And it would be the smart thing for the Supreme Court to do. But of course, we know the Supreme Court isn't necessarily smart. They're complicit. They're corrupt. But we'll see what they do. We've got to get a decision from them sometime soon. I'm one that likes to look positively at things, but I'm prepared to be disappointed by the Supreme Court because we've been disappointed so many times. We'll keep our fingers crossed and hope against hope that the Supreme Court does something right for once. All right, we're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time to listen to the show. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.